Hello, this is Julian with Coffee Reviews, and today we'll be reviewing the Worka Sakaro Ripened Cherry Wash Processed Ethiopia from Onibus Coffee. And there's the cup right there. And Onibus, also based out of Tokyo, Japan. And I'm currently outside of what I believe is their only location, also in Meguro City. And we're going to be trying out this wash processed Ethiopian coffee. And the first thing I wanted to say about this review is just how drastic a change in experience I had from this and Switch Coffee, as the baristas at this location were extremely nice and helpful. She's actually the one that suggested this Ethiopian coffee to me after I asked her which one was her favorite, so I greatly appreciate that. In addition to that, they did give me some recommendations for other coffee shops to visit in Tokyo, so I can't recommend the coffee shop itself enough, as the baristas and everybody was extremely helpful. So let's go ahead and talk about this coffee roaster, as I do have very limited familiarity with them, though it was one notable instance in which I've tried them in the past. Now, this is my first time ever at this location. However, they did a cupping at the La Marzocco. I can't remember if it was back in 2019 or 2020, but they had a residency at the La Marzocco in Seattle, Washington, and that's the only other experience I've had with their coffee. But this right here was a great opportunity, as I have heard a lot about this location too, and it did live up to the expectations. I'm just a little ways away at a park nearby because it is just off of a subway line, so it is quite loud at that spot. Let me go ahead and tell you about the coffee shop real quick, because they do offer a couple of pour-over offerings. This right here was brewed with the V60, and I believe that they had some drip options, but they had at least 2 hand brew options, and this is the one that she suggested. So let's go ahead and discuss this coffee real quick. I think a lot of people know that it's not necessarily my favorite to review wash-processed Ethiopian coffees, mostly because they have to be something really special or out there for me to really enjoy it. This one right here, though, did have a lot more vibrancy than I was expecting. So I'm going to be completely honest, I can't recall my previous instance with this coffee roaster, as it was so long ago, and I've had so many coffee roasters, so many cuppings since then, that I just don't remember that experience. However, from what I recall, I assumed that it was going to be on the slightly more developed side of things, but this is significantly lighter than I was expecting. This coffee is actually a little lighter than even the one I had had from Switch, so that was interesting in itself, and I'm very happy to have had that experience. So this one might just be one of their lighter profiled coffees. But the best thing I can say about it is I noticed right off the bat a very vibrant floral as well as peachy component in the finish, most specifically the peachy aspect of this one. A lot of people know that the thing I look for the most in washed Ethiopian coffees is those floral and peachy notes, so having that peach in significant abundance definitely helped this one right here, as it had even more sweetness than I was expecting. Another notable thing I've found from my brief time on this trip is that so many Japanese coffee roasters do use the Probat as their main roasting machine, and I do believe Onibus does as well, which is really nice. A lot of people know I'm a big fan of the Probat, so let me go ahead as well and put up the tasting wheel so you can get a good idea of what we were getting. Once again, I have my notes right here. So we will start with quite a few level 4s. The cleanliness level 4, yes, this one's quite a clean cup of coffee, and that's what I was hoping for and expecting. Obviously, wash-processed Ethiopian coffee would indicate a lot more clarity to it, but this one right here, especially in terms of that peachy aspect, very well defined, and that's one of the best things I have to say about it, is just how much definition there was in the stone fruit parts of this, which we'll get to in a little bit. Finish, level 4, yes, and it's once again that peachy aspect to it. It tastes a little bit like a candied peach as well, so it's got so many of those just peachy components in general, so more credit to them on that as well. Sweetness, level 4, yes, and I was hoping that it would have an abundance of sweetness, and that's always what's going to set washed Ethiopian coffees apart, is just how much sweetness and clarity they have. So by offering this sweetness, then this was a very wonderful experience in that regard. So many of those candied peach aspects to it. Florality, level 4. Yes, once again, we have a wash-processed Ethiopian coffee, so I was fully expecting at least a bit of floral components, but once again, since this coffee has such a clean base to it, there are so many of those just floral aspects in general. Credit in that regard as well. Berry fruit, level 4. Yes, so the other thing that I haven't touched on too much is that there is plenty of tropicality to it. They do have a passion fruit note listed on here, and that's a very strong flavor in general, and I think I was experiencing a fair bit of definition in that regard as well. So credit to them in that sense. That is what the berry fruit indicates. But this coffee in general is a pretty tropical cup with those peachy aspects too. Stone fruit, level 4. As I've already kind of mentioned, the most defining aspect of this coffee, it is in very notable abundance right from the start. So massive credit to them on that. I always appreciate when there are so many of those peachy notes. And then we have a couple of level 3s. We'll start with the acidity level 3. I kind of toyed around with the idea of maybe pushing this one up a little bit more, but even then, I think there are just much more coffees I've had that have a lot more brightness. It just has a little bit more even of a brightness, which I think a lot of people know isn't necessarily the thing I look for the most in coffee. So that part's fine, being at that level 3. Citrus fruit, level 3. Yes, and I think that it's once again in a slightly tropical sense, but in addition to that, it just has that, I want to say, undefined citric aspect to it as well, but it does give it a little bit more depth and just a little bit more, we'll say depth for this coffee. Caramel, level 3. Yes, and that's the candied aspect that I've been hinting towards since the start of this review, as the kind of candied peach sense to this one is really, really nice. And right from the start, I noticed it in significant abundance right on that cooldown. Right from the first sip, it was present. So that's always something that was going to score pretty high. Once again, it's not necessarily caramel, but rather the candied aspect of this coffee. And then the last thing worth discussing is the body at level 2. Yes, as you would probably expect, we have a washed Ethiopian coffee. Even brewed with the V60, it was always going to hint towards a slightly lighter profile to it. I do think they have something along the lines of tea list on here. I assume that's going to be hinting towards the body of this coffee because it is a lighter bodied cup of coffee. But as I am looking at this tasting wheel, I do think it's a pretty good representation of what I was getting from this coffee. All right, so my overall thoughts and impressions of this coffee. This one definitely exceeded my expectations for a number of reasons, and I think the first of which being that I probably just remembered my previous experiences with this coffee roaster not as well as it turned out to be. And one thing I always suggest to a lot of people is to ask the barista what their favorite coffee is, because they know their coffees better than you will unless you've had all of those coffees. And this suggestion was a really good one from her. I was tentative at the start, given that she suggested an Ethiopian coffee, but it turned out to be a very nice Ethiopian coffee. So even by washed Ethiopian standards, I do think that this was on the better end of washed Ethiopian coffees I've had. And as of right now, this is probably the benchmark for my favorite coffee, and we'll see if there are any coffee roasters that can top this one. Type of person I would suggest this coffee to, I think it is going to be the person... We have another helicopter, of course. I think it is going to be the person that likes your just very vibrant washed Ethiopian coffees that offers so many of the traditional components to it. Clarity, sweetness, the candied aspect, and of course plenty of fruit aspects as well. So I'm going to leave this review at that since we have the helicopter flying over us here shortly. But I'd love to know your guys' thoughts and impressions if you've had an opportunity to try Onibus or this coffee from them as well. If you're enjoying the content, give this video a like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed. This right here has been a review of the Worka Sakaro ripened cherry wash processed Ethiopia from Onibus Coffee. Thank you for watching.